Let's bring in right now Obama's senior foreign policy advisor, Susan Rice. Susan, thank you for being with us. Do you commend George Bush for what happened in North Korea?
Well, Joe, it was an important, albeit modest, first step in the process. And obviously today, with the cooling tower being demolished at the Yongbyon reactor, what we see is that diplomacy, direct diplomacy, can in fact yield modest results. Now, we haven't gotten all the way that we need to with North Korea. We still need to know what they've done with the bombs they've made, whether they have been, as we believe, an active proliferator. We have to worry about their uranium program. But we would not have gotten this far if the Bush administration had not belatedly, after North Korea had gone from 1 to 2 nuclear weapons to 6 to 8 nuclear weapons and detonated a weapon, to negotiations. Now, John McCain is with the Dick Cheney wing of the Bush administration.
Hold a second, Susan. You say belatedly, but people were trying to push George W. Bush into having one-on-one talks with North Korea. He said, no, it's not going to be unilateral. We're going to have 6-party talks. Isn't it better to put everybody around the table?
Actually, Joe, what happened was he did both. He began with the 6-party framework and continued that, but at the urging of his diplomats, agreed to open a direct bilateral channel within the framework of the 6-party talks, and that's when we started getting progress.
I'm stepping back, though. You were criticizing George W. Bush for delaying negotiations. The only reason he delayed negotiations is because he wanted to begin with the 6-party talks. After that framework was set up, then he agreed to have one-on-one talks with North Korea.
Joe, your historical framework is a little bit off. There was a long period of time when we weren't doing any negotiations, 6-party or otherwise, and it was in that time frame where North Korea made enormous progress with its nuclear program. Then we had the 6-party framework, and we added to that a bilateral track, and that was a positive step, which has yielded this modest step that today we're talking about.
Okay, you keep saying it's a modest step. I would say North Korea agreeing to inspections, North Korea blowing up its Are you just saying that this is a modest step because you're in the middle of a political campaign? Because there are a lot of diplomats that are saying this is a big step.
No, Joe, it's in fact what President Bush said yesterday. He said it was a modest step, and the reason why we have to acknowledge it's a modest step, albeit a positive one, is because there's a lot we still don't know. We don't know what's happened to North Korea's suspected uranium enrichment program. We don't know what's happened to the nuclear material that it's already made, the bombs that we believe it already has. And we don't know whether it has proliferated its technology to Syria or other places of concern. We need to get all of that sorted out, as the President himself said yesterday, before we complete the lifting of sanctions. I think it's important to point out, Joe, that had we listened to Dick Cheney and indeed John McCain, we would not have this progress to date. John McCain opposed negotiations. In 1994, he advocated airstrikes against North Korea and threatening North Korea with extinction. Had we done that, we would be in a very, very different place than we are today. This approach that the Bush administration did come to belatedly, but came to, has indeed yielded some modest progress, far better than we would have been if they hadn't done this. And we have to look to the future now and try to nail all this down so that we get more than modest progress, but lasting success.
All right. Of course, John McCain and Dick Cheney and others would say, well, in 1994, we sent Jimmy Carter over to North Korea. They developed a framework that allowed North Korea to develop nuclear weapons, even though Jimmy Carter did get a Nobel Prize out of it. Sanctions. You disagree with the president's easing of sanctions. Does Barack Obama?
I didn't say that.
We have Obama. Headline, AFP, U.S. should maintain sanctions on North Korea. Is that incorrect?
What we've said is that until we have the verifiable certainty that they've dealt with these unanswered questions, we have to be careful. The president yesterday did something very limited. He lifted the restrictions that go back to the Korean War on the Trading with the Enemy Act, commercial sanctions. He did not yet take North Korea off the terrorism list. He said he would do that in 45 days if they have verifiably implemented the commitments that they've made. What Barack Obama has said is we need to be very careful. Sanctions represent important leverage in our negotiations with North Korea. We shouldn't lift those sanctions unless and until we're certain that North Korea is taking the steps that it's committed to take. So we're going to see what happens in the next 45 days.
All right.
Congress will have an opportunity to review this, and we'll all be able to make a judgment, the Bush administration, members of Congress, obviously Senator Obama, as to the extent of the North Korean commitment.
All right. Hey, David Gregory, you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. Hi, Susan. Good morning.
Hi, David.
While we're talking about the prospect of nuclear terrorism, which is what's really behind the concerns about North Korea and Iran, I have a broader question for you and really for Senator Obama. Why is it, does he believe, that America has not been attacked in this country by terrorists since 9/11? And does George W. Bush, President Bush, deserve credit for that?
I think what we have to acknowledge, David, that we haven't been attacked, but we are nonetheless less safe as a consequence of the policies that this administration has pursued. Our standing in the world is at an all-time low. Al-Qaeda has morphed and metastasized and is more dangerous now in Afghanistan and Pakistan than it has been. Our intelligence community is warning that they are reconstituting, and Afghanistan is now more deadly for U.S. forces than Iraq. In Iraq, we have...
But the reality is that operationally, Al-Qaeda is not as strong, and the intelligence community believes that's the case. And I think if anybody thought after 9/11 that we wouldn't be hit for this long, it would have been a surprise to many people, don't you think?
David, I think you have to listen to what our intelligence leaders have been testifying before Congress. They've been saying for many months, indeed going back to last summer, that what we face is a more aggressive, dangerous Al-Qaeda that is metastasizing, that is preparing and plotting inside of Pakistan, and we need to be very, very concerned about that. We also need to be concerned about the fact, David, that for many years we have not succeeded in locking down loose nuclear material in the former Soviet Union and many other countries of the world. 40 countries have loose nuclear material. Barack Obama has been a leader on nuclear proliferation with Richard Lugar in the Senate, and he's committed to locking down loose nuclear materials within his first term as president. If we don't do that, we are creating an environment in which terrorists have an easier opportunity to get their hands on fissile material. This is a very serious concern, and while we have been focused excessively on Iraq, on a country that had nothing to do with 9/11, and a war that has made us less safe and emboldened Iran, we haven't dealt with things like nuclear proliferation.
Susan Rice, it's always great to have you with us. We always like it when you're across the table.